She's going to my philosophy now. In fact, I was going to send her a MAGA hat. They're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. Wait a minute, I'm talking now. If you don't mind, please. Does that sound familiar?
Donald Trump, the candidate, has said in this election there will be a bloodbath.
They have the right to do it. The President of the United States, you'll get him out of bed, you'll wake him up at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, you'll say, come on down to the office, let's sign a bill.
World leaders are laughing at Donald Trump.
I'll give you a little secret, he hates her. But he would have been sitting in Moscow, quiet please. He would have been sitting...
Welcome back to Rattlesnake TV, guys. The US presidential debate has just taken place, one of the biggest debates of our lifetimes, and to be honest, it did not disappoint.
You'll get him out of bed, you'll wake him up at 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
It started off pretty slow and a little bit all over the place, but eventually it really heated up. Trump was locked in and in many moments in the debate really dominated. However, as entertaining as it was and as strong as the points were, this is not a culture war debate, it's a political debate. It's one where you have to appeal to as big an audience as possible. So perhaps he lashed out a little bit too much at some moments, got a little bit too fired up. So I'm not sure that that will go so well for him in terms of winning votes and making people want to vote for him who were on the fence and who have previously been a little bit repulsed by his aggressive style. And on Kamala's side, she was definitely nervous at the start, but she did better than a lot of people thought that she was going to do. Not for me though. I expected her to do away with the fake Southern accent, the cackling and the seeming to be drunk on wine, and I expected her to adopt one of her many personalities for this occasion.
And you all helped us win in 2020, and we're going to do it again in 2024.
Not to toot my own horn, but I did say a few months ago that she is capable of this. She is capable of dropping that persona and appearing not as stupid as she normally does 99% of the time when she's talking about school buses.
Can you raise your hand if you love a yellow school bus, right?
And lastly, the moderators were completely biased. It was a 3-on-1 debate. And I think that that will actually bode pretty well for Trump because it was very obvious that he was in the lion's den. So let's have a brief look at some of the opening statements before we get into the much more heated moments.
Donald Trump has no plan for you. And when you look at his economic plan, it's all about tax breaks for the richest people. I am offering what I describe as an opportunity economy, and the best economists in our country, if not the world, have reviewed our relative plans for the future of America. What Goldman Sachs has said is that Donald Trump's plan would make the economy worse, mine would strengthen the economy. What the Wharton School has said is Donald Trump's plan would actually explode the deficit. 16 Nobel laureates have described his economic plan as something that would increase inflation and by the middle of next year would invite a recession.
Do you believe Americans can afford higher prices because of tariffs?
They're not going to have higher prices. What's going to have and who's going to have higher prices is China and all of the countries that have been ripping us off for years. I was the only president ever. China was paying us hundreds of billions of dollars, and so were other countries. And, you know, if she doesn't like them, they should have gone out and they should have immediately cut the tariffs. But those tariffs are there 3.5 years now under their administration. We are going to take in billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars. I had no inflation, virtually no inflation. They had the highest inflation perhaps in the history of our country because I've never seen a worse period of time. People can't go out and buy cereal or bacon or eggs or anything else. The people of our country are absolutely dying with what they've done. They've destroyed the economy. And all you have to do is look at a poll. The polls say 80 and 85 and even 90% that the Trump economy was great, that their economy was terrible.
Vice President Harris, I do want to ask for your response, and you heard what the president said there, because the Biden administration did keep a number of the Trump tariffs in place. So how do you respond?
Well, let's be clear that the Trump administration resulted in a trade deficit, one of the highest we've ever seen in the history of America. He invited trade wars. You want to talk about his deal with China? What he ended up doing is under Donald Trump's presidency, he ended up selling American chips to China to help them improve and modernize their military, basically sold us out, when a policy about China should be in making sure the United States of America wins the competition for the 21st century.
President Trump, I'll let you respond.
First of all, they bought their chips from Taiwan. We hardly make chips anymore because of philosophies like they have and policies like they have. I don't say her because she has no policy. Everything that she believed 3 years ago and 4 years ago is out the window. She's going to my philosophy now. In fact, I was going to send her a MAGA hat. She's gone to my philosophy. But if she ever got elected, she'd change it. And it will be the end of our country. She's a Marxist. Everybody knows she's a Marxist. Her father's a Marxist professor in economics, and he taught her well. But when you look at what she's done to our country, and when you look at these millions and millions of people that are pouring into our country monthly, where it's, I believe, 21 million people, not the 15 that people say, and I think it's a lot higher than the 21. That's bigger than New York State pouring in. And just look at what they're doing to our country. They're criminals. Many of these people coming in are criminals. And that's bad for our economy, too. You know, you mentioned before, we'll talk about immigration later. Well, bad immigration is the worst thing that can happen to our economy. They have, and she has, destroyed our country with policy that's insane. Almost policy that you'd say they have to hate our country.
President Trump, thank you. Lindsay?
So a slow start there, some decent points there by Trump talking about tariffs and bringing money back to the country. Kamala didn't sound as black as she normally does. Sending her a MAGA hat was a good moment, also calling her a Marxist.
She's a Marxist. Everybody knows she's a Marxist.
So pretty solid, but I do wish that the debate was moderated by people who are a little bit more neutral and people who aren't just mainstream media talking head puppets that are there with an agenda and actually with a game plan to try and trigger Trump. That was obvious and becomes increasingly more obvious throughout the debate. And this is just another shining example of how you just can't trust the mainstream media. And this is why I get my news from Ground News. So let's check out how they're covering the debate. So the good thing about Ground News is that you can go to the homepage interface and use the search bar to search US election. And here are the results to see how the election is being covered throughout the internet. As you can see, we have our top stories here, and then we've got our blind spots, the stories that you may have missed. And one of the top stories here is conservatives rail against ABC moderators after Trump-Harris debate. And we can see there are 41 total news sources covering this and only 4 from the left. They are obviously avoiding this like the plague. And as we go down here, we can see the bias distribution, which shows where all of the different outlets sit in the political spectrum, as well as how the story is being reported from left, center, and right. It's a fantastic tool by a great startup company who are a good friend of the channel and one that I use all the time. They compile tens of thousands of sources from throughout the internet, which saves you the headache of having to go to many different websites to get your news. You can see how it's all done in one place. So all you guys got to do is go to ground.news/rattlesnake. That's ground.news/rattlesnake, or hit the QR code displayed on screen and go and start your plan today. And for Rattlesnake TV watchers, Ground News are offering a massive 40% off the Vantage plan, which is the plan that I use. So do yourself a favor and go to Ground News today and keep yourself armed and dangerous with a healthy news diet. Let's get back to the video. So on to the next part now about abortion, which is a very, very significant part of the debate because it's a chance for Kamala to act indignant and flail about. And it's a very, very tricky topic for Trump. Let's check it out.
Vice President Harris says that women shouldn't trust you on the issue of abortion because you've changed your position so many times. Therefore, why should they trust you?
Well, the reason I'm doing that vote is because the plan is, as you know, the vote is, they have abortion in the 9th month. They even have, and you can look at the governor of West Virginia, the previous governor of West Virginia, not the current governor, who's doing an excellent job, but the governor before, he said the baby will be born and we will decide what to do with the baby. In other words, we'll execute the baby. And that's why I did that, because that predominates, because they're radical. The Democrats are radical in that. And her vice presidential pick, which I think was a horrible pick, by the way, for our country, because he is really out of it. But her vice presidential pick says abortion in the 9th month is absolutely fine. He also says execution after birth. It's execution, no longer abortion, because the baby is born, is okay. And that's not okay with me, hence the vote. But what I did is something for 52 years. They've been trying to get Roe v. Wade into the states. And through the genius and heart and strength of 6 Supreme Court justices, we were able to do that. Now, I believe in the exceptions for rape, incest, and life of the mother. I believe strongly in it. Ronald Reagan did also. 85% of Republicans do. Exceptions. Very important. But we were able to get it, and now states are voting on it. And for the first time, you're going to see, look, this is an issue that's torn our country apart for 52 years. Every legal scholar, every Democrat, every Republican, liberal, conservative, they all wanted this issue to be brought back to the states where the people could vote. And that's what happened.
And now in over 20 states, there are Trump abortion bans, which make it criminal for a doctor or nurse to provide health care. In one state, it provides prison for life. Trump abortion bans that make no exception even for rape and incest, which understand what that means. A survivor of a crime, a violation to their body, does not have the right to make a decision about what happens to their body next. That is immoral. And one does not have to abandon their faith or deeply held beliefs to agree. The government, and Donald Trump certainly, should not be telling a woman what to do with her body. Understand, if Donald Trump were to be reelected, he will sign a national abortion ban. Understand, in his Project 2025, there would be a national abortion, a monitor that would be monitoring your pregnancies, your miscarriages.
They talk about abortion.
But if I could just get a yes or no, because your running mate, J.D. Vance, has said that you would veto it if it did come to your desk.
Well, I didn't discuss it with J.D. In all fairness, J.D., and I don't mind if he has a certain view, but I think he was speaking for me, but I really didn't. Look, we don't have to discuss it because she'd never be able to get it, just like she couldn't get student loans. They couldn't get student loans. They didn't even come close to getting student loans. They taunted young people and a lot of other people that had loans. They can never get this approved. So it doesn't matter what she says about going to Congress. Well, wonderful. Let's go to Congress. Do it.
Would you support any restrictions on a woman's right to an abortion?
I absolutely support reinstating the protections of Roe v. Wade. And as you rightly mentioned, nowhere in America is a woman carrying a pregnancy to term and asking for an abortion. That is not happening. It's insulting to the women of America. And understand what has been happening under Donald Trump's abortion bans. Couples who pray and dream of having a family are being denied IVF treatments. What is happening in our country? Working people, working women who are working 1 or 2 jobs, who can barely afford childcare as it is, have to travel to another state to get on a plane sitting next to strangers to go and get the health care she needs. Barely can afford to do it, and what you are putting her through is unconscionable. And the people of America have not, the majority of Americans believe in a woman's right to make decisions about her own body, and that is why in every state where this issue has been on the ballot, in red and blue states both, the people of America have voted for freedom.
You should ask, will she allow abortion in the 8th month, 9th month, 7th month?
Come on.
Okay, would you do that? Why don't you ask her that question?
Why don't you answer the question? Would you
because
veto?
Under Roe v. Wade,
Answer the question, would you veto?
You could do abortions in the 7th month, the 8th month, the 9th
That's
month,
not true.
and probably after birth. Just look at the governor, former governor of Virginia. The governor of Virginia said, we put the baby aside and then we determine what we want to do with the baby.
President Trump, thank you.
So Kamala, in terms of appealing to who she wants to appeal to, pretty strong there. But also, I think Trump did well. He definitely would not want to get tied down too much in this topic. He did well at the end there to point out how extreme and radical the Democrats are on abortion, and probably should have made her answer that question about late-term abortion. Why are we talking about these extreme cases that significantly disadvantage the Republican side when the Democrats allow for late-term abortions in many of their states? I mean, there are states in which late-term abortion is legal, and Donald Trump would have done well to know which states they are and to point them out and hold her feet to the fire a little bit more. Even Tim Walz in 2023 signed a bill removing the requirement to try and save babies that are born alive after a botched abortion. They just let them die.
Governor Tim Walz caps a 4-week sprint to guarantee abortion access in state law. It was the Democrats' top priority after taking control of state government this month.
And in terms of post-birth abortions, this is what Trump is referring to when he's talking about the governor of Virginia, detailing how they do this.
You know, when we talk about third trimester abortions, these are done with the consent of obviously the mother, with the consent of the physicians, more than one physician, by the way. And it's done in cases where there may be severe deformities, there may be a fetus that's non-viable. So in this particular example, if a mother is in labor, I can tell you exactly what would happen. The infant would be delivered. The infant would be kept comfortable. The infant would be resuscitated if that's what the mother and the family desired. And then a discussion would ensue between the physicians and the mother. So I think this was really blown out of proportion. But again, we want the government not to be involved in these types of decisions. We want the decision to be made by the mothers and their providers.
So it's a tough one for Trump, and he did okay. I mean, he's stuck between a rock and a hard place here. He has to appeal to the Christian side of his base that are completely against abortion, and he did that when he called it the execution of babies. But also, he appealed to the people who might be on the fence by saying that he's going to leave it up to the states. But the end there was definitely strong for him, and the moderators tried to hold him to the fire and make him answer questions, but then wouldn't do the same for Kamala.
They talk about abortion.
But if I could just get a yes or no, because your running mate, J.D. Vance, has said that you would veto it if it did come to your desk.
Well, America have voted for freedom.
Vice President Harris,
excuse me, I have to respond.
But he threw the last punch, and now he has the chance to really hone in on the border and the immigration crisis and the blatant incompetency of the Biden-Harris administration on this issue. So on to the next bit now, where it gets a little bit personal, also pretty entertaining and funny. This is the moment where the most intense period of the debate begins. It had me glued to the screen.
And I'll tell you something, he's going to talk about immigration a lot tonight, even when it's not the subject that is being raised.
I know everything he's got to say against me.
And I'm going to actually do something really unusual, and I'm going to invite you to attend one of Donald Trump's rallies, because it's a really interesting thing to watch. You will see during the course of his rallies, he talks about fictional characters like Hannibal Lecter. He will talk about windmills cause cancer. And what you will also notice is that people start leaving his rallies early out of exhaustion and boredom. And I will tell you, the one thing you will not hear him talk about is you. You will not hear him talk about your needs, your dreams, and your desires. And I'll tell you, I believe you deserve a president who actually puts you first, and I pledge to you that I will.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump, on that point, I want to get your response.
Well, I would like to respond.
Let me just ask, though, why did you try to kill that bill, and successfully so, that would have put thousands of additional agents and officers on the border?
First, let me respond as to the
Please.
rallies. She said people start leaving. People don't go to her rallies. There's no reason to go. And the people that do go, she's bussing them in and paying them to be there, and then showing them in a different light. So she can't talk about that. People don't leave my rallies. We have the biggest rallies, the most incredible rallies in the history of politics. That's because people want to take their country back. Our country is being lost. We're a failing nation. And it happened 3.5 years ago. And what's going on here, you're going to end up in World War III, just to go into another subject. What they have done to our country by allowing these millions and millions of people to come into our country, and look at what's happening to the towns all over the United States. And a lot of towns don't want to talk. It's not going to be Aurora or Springfield. A lot of towns don't want to talk about it because they're so embarrassed by it. In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there. And this is what's happening in our country, and it's a shame. As far as rallies are concerned, as far as the reason they go is they like what I say. They want to bring our country back. They want to make America great again. It's a very simple phrase, make America great again. She's destroying this country, and if she becomes president, this country doesn't have a chance of success. Not only success, we'll end up being Venezuela on steroids.
So she definitely baited him there about the rallies, and Trump took the bait, which made me nervous for a second, but it actually didn't turn out too badly for him. I mean, everybody knows that Trump has big, amazing rallies. It's what he's known for, and there are many videos that you can look at where there's thousands and thousands of people that are there to see him. This is just common knowledge.
100,000 tickets were requested. They could only fill about 20,000, maybe 25 if they're lucky here, but you're taking a live look at these aerials right now, and this is impressive.
And we also know that nobody comes to hers or Biden's rallies. But then, the best, most iconic moment of the debate when he says, "They're eating the dogs."
They're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats.
That is hilarious, and that is a line that will go down in history. And what he's referring to is a video that's been circulating this week of a Haitian immigrant eating a cat.
Smile for me. Smile over to you. Go like this. Did you eat that cat?
So the fact that he said they're eating the dogs there, even though he said cats after, makes it all the more iconic and hilarious. Just gold in a comedic sense, but on to the next bit now where they talk about the migrant crisis and migrant crime. But before we get there, guys, don't forget to smash the like button on this video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And also, guys, I've got the unfazed Trump merch plus much more Trump merch in the reality-based store. Just below, you can hit those links, search our catalog, most base merch in the entire world. Let's get back
earlier. So let's get back to your deportation proposal that the vice president has reacted to as well. President Trump, you call this the largest domestic deportation operation in the history of our country. You say you would use the National Guard. You say if things get out of control, you'd have no problem using the U.S. military.
Police, yes.
You also said you would use local police. How would you deport 11 million undocumented immigrants? I know you believe that number is much higher. Take us through this. What does this look like? Will authorities be going door to door in this country?
Yeah, it is much higher because of them. They allowed criminals, many, many millions of criminals. They allowed terrorists. They allowed common street criminals. They allowed people to come in, drug dealers, to come into our country. And they're now in the United States and told by their countries like Venezuela, don't ever come back or we're going to kill you. Do you know that crime in Venezuela and crime in countries all over the world is way down? You know why? Because they've taken their criminals off the street and they've given them to her to put into our country. And this will be one of the greatest mistakes in history for them to allow, and I think they probably did it because they think they're going to get votes, but it's not worth it because they're destroying the fabric of our country by what they've done. There's never been anything done like this at all. They've destroyed the fabric of our country. Millions of people let in, and all over the world, crime is down all over the world except here. Crime here is up and through the roof. Despite their fraudulent statements that they made, crime in this country is through the roof. And we have a new form of crime. It's called migrant crime. And it's happening at levels that nobody thought possible.
President Trump, as you know, the FBI says overall violent crime is actually coming down in this country. But Vice
Excuse me,
President
the FBI they were defrauding statements. They didn't include the worst cities. They didn't include the cities with the worst crime. It was a fraud. Just like their number of 818,000 jobs that they said they created turned out to be a fraud.
So strong points there for Trump, and it paints a pretty vivid picture when he talks about foreign leaders sending their criminals to America and exploiting the immigration system and the open border that has been overseen by the Biden and Harris administration. And particularly that she is the one who is in charge of this border. And this is really what Trump should be focusing on here. The policy or lack of policy vision that Kamala Harris has. And the obvious fact that if she were to be elected, this border crisis would only intensify because they're clearly not wanting to do anything about it. They want the immigrants. He should be bringing this up as much as possible. Maybe bringing up the demographic changes and the threat of terrorism. But this is the moment now where you see Trump start to really get into his element, fire up, and start going off instinct. He starts to dominate the conversation and the room and not be quite as calculated as maybe a lot of people would want him to be. But that is just Trump. And I mean, I think that the Kamala Harris camp would want this. They probably think that it plays into their hands. And they're probably not without a point. So, on to the next part.
Vice President Harris, in your last run for president, you said you wanted to ban fracking. Now you don't. You wanted mandatory government buyback programs for assault weapons. Now your campaign says you don't. You supported decriminalizing border crossings. Now you're taking a harder line. I know you say that your values have not changed. So then why have so many of your policy positions changed?
My values have not changed. And what is important is that there is a president who actually brings values and a perspective that is about lifting people up and not beating people down and name calling. The true measure of the leader is the leader who actually understands the strength is not in beating people down, it's in lifting people up. I intend to be that president.
Fracking? She's been against it for 12 years. Defund the police. She's been against that forever. She gave all that stuff up very wrongly, very horribly, and everybody's laughing at it, okay? They're all laughing at it. She gave up at least 12 and probably 14 or 15 different policies. Like, she was big on defund the police. In Minnesota, she went out, wait a minute, I'm talking now, if you don't mind, please. Does that sound familiar?
Don't lie.
She went out in Minnesota and wanted to let criminals that killed people, that burned down Minneapolis, she went out and raised money to get them out of jail. She did things that nobody would ever think of. Now she wants to do transgender operations on illegal aliens that are in prison. This is a radical left liberal that would do this. She wants to confiscate your guns, and she will never allow fracking in Pennsylvania. If she won the election, fracking in Pennsylvania will end on day one. Just to finish, one thing so important in my opinion. So I got the oil business going like nobody has ever done before. When they took over, they got rid of it, started getting rid of it, and the prices were going up the roof. They immediately let these guys go to where they were. I would have been 5 times, 4 times, 5 times higher, because you're talking about 3.5 years ago. They got it up to where I was because they had no choice, because the prices of energy were quadrupling and doubling. You saw what happened to gasoline. So they said, let's go back to Trump. But if she won the election, the day after that election, they'll go back to destroying our country, and oil will be dead, fossil fuel will be dead, we'll go back to windmills, and we'll go back to solar.
So he's absolutely right there about everything that he's saying, and she's just virtue signaling and pandering and being a complete phony. Surprise. She has definitely said that she wants to get rid of fracking, and she is against it.
There's no question I'm in favor of banning fracking. So, yeah.
She was definitely bailing out BLM terrorists.
Black Lives Matter has been the most significant agent for change within the criminal justice system.
I mean, she's so dishonest and just flip-flops so much, depending on which way the wind is blowing, that it is almost incredible. But no fact-checking from the moderators, none to be seen whatsoever. Big surprise. But another pretty funny moment there. I'm talking. Does that sound familiar? And what he's referring to is her debate with Mike Pence, where she did the same thing.
Mr. Vice President, I'm speaking.
Well,
I'm speaking.
Be important if you said the truth. Joe Biden said twice in the...
So now on to the next part where the lies continue and Kamala Harris hashes out some old and debunked lies that is quite difficult to watch.
The country and the world saw what played out at the Capitol that day, the officers coming under attack. Aides in the West Wing say you watched it unfold on television off the Oval Office. You did send out tweets, but it was more than 2 hours before you sent out that video message telling your supporters to go home. Is there anything you regret about what you did on that day?
You just said a thing that isn't covered. Peacefully and patriotically, I said during my speech, not later on. Peacefully and patriotically. And nobody on the other side was killed. Ashley Babbitt was shot by an out-of-control police officer that should have never, ever shot her. It's a disgrace. But we didn't do this group of people that have been treated so badly. I ask, what about all the people that are pouring into our country and killing people that she allowed to pour in? She was the border czar, remember that. She was the border czar. She doesn't want to be called the border czar because she's embarrassed by the border. In fact, she said at the beginning, well, I'm surprised you're not talking about the border yet. That's because she knows what a bad job they've done. What about those people? What are they going to be prosecuted? When are these people from countries all over the world, not just South America, they're coming in from all over the world, David, all over the world. And crime rates are down all over the world because of it.
But let me just ask you.
David, when are those people going to be prosecuted? When are the people that burned down Minneapolis going to be prosecuted? Or in Seattle? They went into Seattle. They took over a big percentage of the city of Seattle. When are those people going to be prosecuted?
But let me just ask
you. might ask her that question.
The former president has been indicted and impeached for exactly that reason. But this is not an isolated situation. Let's remember Charlottesville, where there was a mob of people carrying tiki torches, spewing anti-Semitic hate. And what did the president then at the time say? There were fine people on each side. Let's remember that when it came to the Proud Boys, a militia, the president said, the former president said, stand back and stand by. So for everyone watching who remembers what January 6th was, I say, we don't have to go back. Let's not go back. We're not going back. It's time to turn the page. And if that was a bridge too far for you, well, there is a place in our campaign for you to stand for country, to stand for our democracy, to stand for rule of law, and to end the chaos, and to end the approach that is about attacking the foundations of our democracy because you don't like the outcome. And be clear on that point. Donald Trump, the candidate, has said in this election there will be a bloodbath if this and the outcome of this election is not to his liking. Let's turn the page on this. Let's not go back. Let's chart a course for the future and not go backwards to the past.
So the moderators here are just so biased, and it's very clear that this is a tactic for them. They have gone into this with the agenda of going 3-on-1 against Trump and trying to get him on the defense and to try and trigger him and get him really fired up so that he says things that they can use against him. But in terms of Kamala Harris's lies, she actually brought up the Charlottesville good people on both sides lie, something that has been debunked so many times. Even Snopes, who are a left-wing fact-checking organization, completely debunked this. So it is a shameless lie and something that only the most gullible and uneducated people will actually fall for, which is unfortunately a lot of people. But she also said that he said there's going to be a bloodbath, as if to say that he is insinuating that there will be some sort of a violent conflict, a civil war of sorts, which is just horrendously inappropriate. According to Merriam-Webster, the definition of bloodbath can mean major economic disaster. And this is something that's commonly used in economic parlance. On to the next moment now, which I think is a strong one for Trump.
Let me just follow up here.
It was a different term, and it was a term that related to energy because they have destroyed our energy business. That was where bloodbath was. Also, on Charlottesville, that story has been, as you would say, debunked. Laura Ingraham, Sean Hannity, Jesse, all of these people, they covered it. If they go an extra sentence, they will see it was perfect. It was debunked in almost every newspaper, but they still bring it up, just like they bring 2025 up. They bring all of this stuff up. I ask you this, you talk about the Capitol. Why are we allowing these millions of people to come through on the southern border? How come she's not doing anything? And I'll tell you what I would do, and I would be very proud to do it. I would say we would both leave this debate right now. I'd like to see her go down to Washington, D.C. during this debate because we're wasting a lot of time. Go down to, because she's been so bad, it's so ridiculous. Go down to Washington, D.C. and let her sign a bill to close up the border because they have the right to do it. They don't need bills. They have the right to do it. The President of the United States, you'll get him out of bed. You'll wake him up at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Right. You'll say, come on down to the office. Let's sign a bill. If he signs a bill that the border is closed, all he has to do is say it to the Border Patrol, who are phenomenal. If they do that, the border is closed.
Mr.
Those
President,
people are killing many people, unlike J6. We have to have borders, and we have to have good elections. Our elections are bad. And a lot of these illegal immigrants coming in, they're trying to get them to vote. They can't even speak English. They don't even know what country they're in practically. And these people are trying to get them to vote. And that's why they're allowing them to come into our country.
I did watch all of these pieces of video. I didn't detect the sarcasm, lost by a whisker. We didn't quite make it. And we should just point out here as clarification, and you know this, you and your allies, 60 cases in front of many judges, many of them Republican.
No judge looked at it.
And said
they
there was
said
no
we didn't have
widespread
standing.
fraud.
That's the other thing. They said we didn't have standing, a technicality. Can you imagine a system where a person in an election doesn't have standing? The President of the United States doesn't have standing. That's how we lost. If you look at the facts, and I'd love to have you'll do a special on it. I'll show you Georgia, and I'll show you Wisconsin, and I'll show you Pennsylvania, and I'll show you. We have so many facts and statistics, but you know what? That doesn't matter, because we have to solve the problem that we have right now. That's old news. And the problem that we have right now is we have a nation in decline, and they have put it into decline. We have a nation that is dying, David.
Mr. President, thank you. Vice President Harris, you heard the president there tonight. He said he didn't say that he lost by a whisker. So he still believes he did not lose the election that was won by President Biden and yourself.
Get him out of bed and close the border. Classic. I mean, how can you not love that? That is just objectively very funny. And they do have the ability to do that, but they just don't want to, because the Democrats want illegals to come into the country that will eventually vote Democrat, and all of their children will vote Democrat as well. This, when you consider the changing demographics of the United States of America, could have them in power perpetually. The more immigrants you have voting, the more of an advantage the Democrats will inevitably have. But I do like the way that Trump appeals to the lack of time there. He creates a real sense of urgency. He stresses that we're wasting time even being on this stage while there are millions of people coming across the southern border. Anyways, Trump also did a great job of debating the moderator. I really wasn't aware that this was a Trump v. Harris and the moderators debate, but clearly it was. I was mistaken. I mean, seriously, why does this hack have to keep on giving his pathetic little 2 cents worth?
I did watch all of these pieces of video. I didn't detect the sarcasm, lost by a whisker. We didn't quite make it.
Anyways, on to the next bit now, where they talk about world leaders.
But I do want to ask you about something that's come up in the last couple of days. This was a post from President Trump about this upcoming election just weeks away. He said, when I win, those people who cheated, and then he lists donors, voters, election officials, he says will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, which will include long-term prison sentences. One of your campaign's top lawyers responded saying, we won't let Donald Trump intimidate us. We won't let him suppress the vote. Is that what you believe he's trying to do here?
Donald Trump was fired by 81 million people. So let's be clear about that. And clearly he is having a very difficult time processing that. But we cannot afford to have a president of the United States who attempts, as he did in the past, to upend the will of the voters in a free and fair election. And I'm going to tell you that I have traveled the world as Vice President of the United States. And world leaders are laughing at Donald Trump. I have talked with military leaders, some of whom worked with you, and they say you're a disgrace. And when you then talk in this way in a presidential debate and deny what over and over again are court cases you have lost because you did in fact lose that election, it leads one to believe that perhaps we do not have in the candidate to my right the temperament or the ability to not be confused about fact. That's deeply troubling, and the American people deserve better.
I'll give you 1 minute to respond, Mr. President.
Let me just say about world leaders. Viktor Orban, one of the most respected men, they call him a strong man. He's a tough person, smart. Prime Minister of Hungary. They said, why is the whole world blowing up? 3 years ago it wasn't. Why is it blowing up? He said, because you need Trump back as president. They were afraid of him. China was afraid, and I don't like to use the word afraid, but I'm just quoting him. China was afraid of him. North Korea was afraid of him. Look at what's going on with North Korea, by the way. He said Russia was afraid of him. I ended the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, and Biden put it back on day one, but he ended the XL pipeline. The XL pipeline in our country, he ended that. But he let the Russians build a pipeline going all over Europe and heading into Germany, the biggest pipeline in the world. Look, Viktor Orban said it. He said the most respected, most feared person is Donald Trump. We had no problems when Trump was president, but when this weak, pathetic man that you saw at a debate just a few months ago, that if he weren't in that debate, he'd be running instead of her. She got no votes. He got 14 million votes. What you did, you talk about a threat to democracy. He got 14 million votes, and they threw him out of office. And you know what? I'll give you a little secret. He hates her. He can't stand her. But he got 14 million votes. They threw him out. She got 0 votes. And when she ran, she was the first one to leave because she failed. And now she's running. I don't understand it, but I'm okay with it because
your time is
I think we're going to do very well.
Okay, so it's obviously funny and a pretty clippable moment when he says that Joe Biden hates her.
He hates her.
And it's going to elicit a response, but will it be the kind of response that Trump wants? I think it could be an error. And it could definitely be something that his opponents will use as ammunition against him. And this sort of thing will probably favor Kamala because the media will jump all over this and they will take these moments and they will compare the rhetoric and they will say, look at Donald Trump. He's so fired up. He's unhinged. He's emotional. He's not capable of leading the country. And then they'll get Kamala Harris as pandering, let's all hold hands in unity and kumbaya moments, and they will say, look at the difference. One of them is so presidential, one of them is so unhinged. So time will tell, and we'll see how that one plays out. But on the topic of world leaders, that is one that Trump absolutely has over Biden and definitely has over Kamala Harris. Trump, being the unpredictable guy that he is and being the negotiator and the master of the deal that he is, has the respect and the fear of international leaders. And here's the clip that he was talking about of Viktor Orban talking to Tucker.
So if you were in charge of NATO, if you were, say, Joe Biden, what would your next move be in the war in Ukraine? What would you do?
Peace, immediately. Call back Trump. That's the only way out.
Call back Trump.
Call back Trump. Because, you know, you can criticize him for many reasons. I understand all the discussion, but, you know, the best foreign policy of the recent several decades belonged to him. He did not initiate any new war.
Yes.
He treated nicely the North Koreans and Russia, even the Chinese, you know. He delivered a policy which was the best one for Middle East, Abraham Accords.
Yes.
So that was a very good foreign policy. He's criticized that he's not educated enough to understand the world. This is not the case. Facts counts. And his foreign policy was the best one for the world in the last several decades I have seen. And if he would have been the president at the moment of the Russian invasion started, no, it would be not possible to do that by the Russians. So Trump is the man who can save the Western world and probably the human beings in the globe as well. That's my personal conviction.
So Viktor Orban, a great leader, one of my favorite world leaders, praising Donald Trump there. And then you just think about what Kamala Harris would look like if she was to go into a meeting with people like Orban, like Pu, like Xi, some of the biggest savages in the world. She would get walked all over. There is just no doubt in my mind about that. Now, speaking of world leaders and global conflicts, one that is going to be incredibly important for Donald Trump is going to be the Ukraine conflict. Let's have a look at what Trump had to say about this.
And I want to turn to the war in Ukraine. We're now 2.5 years into this conflict. Mr. President, it has been the position of the Biden administration that we must defend Ukraine from Russia, from Vladimir Putin, to defend their sovereignty, their democracy, that it's in America's best interest to do so, arguing that if Putin wins, he may be emboldened to move even further into other countries. You have said you would solve this war in 24 hours. You said so just before the break tonight. How exactly would you do that? And I want to ask you a very simple question tonight. Do you want Ukraine to win this war?
I want the war to stop. I want to save lives that are being uselessly, people being killed by the millions. It's the millions. It's so much worse than the numbers that you're getting, which are fake numbers. Look, we're in for 250 billion or more because they don't ask Europe, which is a much bigger beneficiary to getting this thing done than we are. they're in for $150 billion less because Biden and you don't have the courage to ask Europe, like I did with NATO. They paid billions and billions, hundreds of billions of dollars when I said, either you pay up or we're not going to protect you anymore. So that's maybe one of the reasons they don't like me as much as they like weak people. But you take a look at what's happening. We're in for 250 to 275 billion. They're into 100 to 150. They should be forced to equalize. With that being said, I want to get the war settled. I know Zelensky very well, and I know Putin very well. I have a good relationship, and they respect your president, okay? They respect me. They don't respect Biden. How would you respect him? Why? For what reason? He hasn't even made a phone call in 2 years to Putin, hasn't spoken to anybody. They don't even try and get it. That is a war that's dying to be settled. I will get it settled before I even become president. If I win, when I'm president-elect, and what I'll do is I'll speak to one, I'll speak to the other, I'll get them together. That war would have never happened. And in fact, when I saw Putin after I left, unfortunately left because our country has gone to hell. But after I left, when I saw him building up soldiers, he did it after I left, I said, oh, he must be negotiating. It must be a good, strong point of negotiation. Well, it wasn't, because Biden had no idea how to talk to him. He had no idea how to stop it. And now you have millions of people dead, and it's only getting worse, and it could lead to World War III. Don't kid yourself, David. We're playing with World War III, and we have a president that we don't even know if he's... Where is our president? We don't even know if he's a president.
And just to clarify
here... They threw him out of a campaign like a dog. We don't even know. Is he our president? But we have a president,
Mr. President,
that doesn't know he's alive.
Your time is up. Just to clarify in the question, do you believe it's in the U.S. best interest for Ukraine to win this war, yes or no?
I think it's the U.S. best interest to get this war finished and just get it done.
All right.
Negotiate a deal, because we have to stop all of these human lives from being destroyed.
Do you want Ukraine to win the war? I mean, such a stupid question. Ukraine can't win that war. Ukraine are seriously and devastatingly losing that war. They've lost hundreds and thousands of men in this war that will inevitably be useless, because the likely scenario is that when the war is over, there will be some sort of a neutral Ukrainian state, because Russia aren't going to lose anytime soon, and all of the fighting would have basically been for nothing. So Trump gave the perfect response there, which is end the war, end the suffering, end the killing. Innocent lives are being taken by the millions, according to him, more like the hundreds of thousands, I think. But honestly, the numbers are fake. We don't really know what's going on, so it could well be into the millions by now. The country of Ukraine is in a terrible state. I've got some friends over there, and they don't even have electricity in some of these places.
Воды питьевой нет. В квартирах 10-12 градусов. Газа нет, все замерзают. Продукты нет, мужики мародерят. Деревья вырубают, трупы хоронят во дворах пятиэтажек, девятиэтажек. Ребят, ну это страшно, так нельзя.
They're literally hanging on by the skin of their teeth. And if Donald Trump was to get into office, and if he was to end that war, it would be a good thing for everybody. Let's see what Kamala Harris had to say about it.
I want to take this to Vice President Harris. I want to get your thoughts on support for Ukraine in this moment, but also as Commander-in-Chief, if elected, how would you deal with Vladimir Putin, and would it be any different from what we're seeing from President Biden?
Well, first of all, it's important to remind the former president, you're not running against Joe Biden, you're running against me. I believe the reason that Donald Trump says that this war would be over within 24 hours is because he would just give it up. And that's not who we are as Americans. We brought 50 countries together to support Ukraine in its righteous defense. And because of our support, because of the air defense, the ammunition, the artillery, the javelins, the Abrams tanks that we have provided, Ukraine stands as an independent and free country. If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now. And understand what that would mean, because Putin's agenda is not just about Ukraine. Understand why the European allies and our NATO allies are so thankful that you are no longer president, and that we understand the importance of the greatest military alliance the world has ever known, which is NATO, and what we have done to preserve the ability of Zelensky and the Ukrainians to fight for their independence. Otherwise, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv with his eyes on the rest of Europe, starting with Poland. And why don't you tell the 800,000 Polish Americans right here in Pennsylvania how quickly you would give up for the sake of favor and what you think is a friendship with what is known to be a dictator who would eat you for lunch.
Vice President Harris, thank you. We've heard from both of you on Ukraine tonight. Afghanistan came up in the last hour. I wanted her to respond to something you said earlier, and please, I'll give you a minute here.
Putin would be sitting in Moscow, and he wouldn't have lost 300,000 men and women, but he would have been sitting in Moscow. Quiet, please. He would have been sitting in Moscow, much happier than he is right now. But eventually, you know, he's got a thing that other people don't have. He's got nuclear weapons. They don't ever talk about that. He's got nuclear weapons. Nobody ever thinks about that. And eventually, maybe he'll use them, and maybe he hasn't been that threatening. But he does have that, something we don't even like to talk about. Nobody likes to talk about it. But just so you understand, they sent her to negotiate peace before this war started. 3 days later, he went in and he started the war because everything they said was weak and stupid. They said the wrong things. That war should have never started. She was the emissary. They sent her in to negotiate with Zelensky and Putin, and she did. And the war started 3 days later. And that's the kind of talent we have with her. She's worse than Biden. In my opinion, I think he's the worst president in the history of our country. She goes down as the worst vice president in the history of our country. But let me tell you something. She is a horrible negotiator. They sent her in to negotiate. As soon as they left, Putin did the invasion.
So just a big old nothing burger there by Kamala Harris. And she is really not one to speak on the Ukraine war because her going over there, like Donald Trump said, led to Putin invading very shortly after because of her inflammatory rhetoric. And Ukraine being an independent country, well, not really at the moment. And if the war continues, they definitely will not be an independent country. So if it's that you want, they have to be neutral. The war has to end, and they've already lost an entire generation of young men. But anyways, another good moment there. Quiet, please. I quite like that. But obviously, according to my taste, I enjoy the more fiery debates. I like that sort of thing. But like I said, it's a presidential debate, not a culture war debate. This is very different. So in the coming days, we are going to see how the polls change. We are going to see how the betting odds change. And that will tell us a story about who is the real winner here. And at the moment, all you can really say is that regardless of what happens in that regard, the presidential race for 2024 is on. A few months ago, when Donald Trump was nearly assassinated, a lot of the right wing, a lot of the Republicans were doing a victory lap. And that is not the case anymore because Sleepy Joe Biden is out, Kamala is in, and as much as we don't like Kamala Harris, or as much as I definitely don't like Kamala Harris, on that debate stage, she looked leaps and bounds better than Joe Biden. So, going to be very interesting to see what happens here, guys. Don't forget, if you want to get your Trump merch, if you want to support the big guy, you can check out the reality-based store, and also you can support the channel directly. Don't forget to check out Ground News, a fantastic company doing great things, and also like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and if you'd like to watch another video, right here. Till next time, I'm Jake. This is Rattlesnake TV, keeping you armed and dangerous.